The time is at hand.
From the parking lot of my job, in the midst of crackheads, you're in dark places. My name is Junebug Fugit. Sorry, this is about as good as it's going to get for right now. The home studio is just getting way too noisy, so I'm out in the car right now. Seems to be the only place I can get some quiet.
This is Mr. Haunted, your In Dark news correspondent, with some breaking, tragic news. I first went to Snopes, even though I don't trust them 100% either, but fact-checked. Man said he found dead baby in late mother's freezer after 37 years. Here's what we know. Here's the claim. A St. Louis man found his late mother's dead baby in their freezer 37 years after it was born. And this was rated as true. Now, how does this happen? On May 10th, 2024, a TikTok user posted a video allegedly showing the story of a man who found the body of a dead baby that was in a box in his freezer for 37 years. In the footage, which was structured as a news report, the narrator explained now 37-year-old Adam Smith made the shocking discovery while going through his mother's belongings in their apartment after she died of cancer. Smith's mother purportedly kept the box inside the freezer for decades, but told him never to go near it. I'm 37, and it's been in my freezer for 37 years, and I was always told it was like a wedding cake topper or something, Smith said in a 61-second clip before adding, there was a pink blanket, baby blanket, and when I reached down and touched it, I could feel a foot, and I could see the baby's head with hair. Hair was still attached to it. The narrator also said the baby was less than a year old when he died, but was never legally named. Similar posts appeared elsewhere on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Together, they had amassed more than 10.5 million views at the time of this writing. Snopes found numerous news reports detailing the incident from July 20th, which is why we have rated the story true. Smith of St. Louis, Missouri, moved in with his mother after she was diagnosed with cancer. He found the mummified remains while sorting through her belongings after she died. On July 12th, 2023, local news outlet First Alert 4 issued an update on the story. Police told the publication the baby, who they determined to be a boy, did not die from homicide. Investigators believe the child was wearing clothes made in the 1960s, was less than a year old, and was never legally named when he died, according to the report. Could you imagine all the ice cream cones he made or had growing up, all his TV dinners, and they were sitting amongst a dead baby's remains? Anyway, this is Mr. Haunted with your breaking In Dark Places news. Back to you, Junebug.
Jimmy Haunted, we got a great show for you this week. This is Vanished, Part 2. In 1950, a Douglas C-54 Skymaster left Anchorage, bound for Minnesota, with 44 people on board, 8 crew members, 3 engineers, 34 service members, and 2 civilians. The plane was expected to make regular radio contact as it traveled, but all communication stopped shortly after takeoff, and the plane never arrived in Minnesota. More than 75 U.S. and Canadian aircraft participated in the search for the missing plane, but the aircraft and its passengers were never seen again.
The vanishing of Mary, Fanny, and Jesse Stewart. On December 10th, 1978, Mary Stewart and her two daughters, Fanny and Jessie, left their home in Honeydew, California, for a day of errands, specifically grocery shopping and to get their TV repaired and to the optometrist. The three did not make it home that night, so one of Mary's friends reported them missing. Police checked with local optometrists and TV repair places, asking if they'd seen the Stewart girls, but none had. Almost a month later, their car was found on an old logging road just a few miles from their home. Detectives found their bags of groceries and a now repaired TV inside and noticed the car's gas line was broken. There was no sign of the family, nor were there any indications of foul play. The prime suspect in the case was Byron McGray Stewart, Mary's husband and the girl's father. He had a history of violence and aggression, but police did not have enough evidence to tie the case to him. While it was reopened in 2009, the case remains unsolved, and Mary, Fanny, and Jessie have never been found.
George Mallory was a schoolmaster in England and a seasoned mountain climber. He had trained on the most difficult routes up the Alps before being recruited for the first major climbing expedition up Mount Everest in 1921. That first attempt was thwarted by high winds, and a second attempt in 1922, which also failed, involved an avalanche and the death of 7 porters. Finally, in 1924, he set out on a third expedition. Mallory and another climber, Andrew Irvine, went off to attempt the summit on June 8th and were never seen again. They left the world to wonder what had taken place on that fateful day, including whether, before disappearing, they had become the first climbers ever to reach the summit. Irvine's axe was found in 1933 at about 27,750 feet, which seemed to indicate that they did not make it to the top, and likely fell to their deaths. 75 years later, in 1999, an expedition discovered Mallory's body at 26,760 feet. As of 2015, Irvine's remains have not been found, and the exact circumstances of their deaths are as yet undetermined.
Missing woman's body found 28 years later behind a false wall. The hidden skeleton of a woman who had been missing for 28 years came to light when a contractor cleaned out a vacant home in the town of Poughkeepsie, New York. The gruesome find was uncovered behind a false wall in the basement of the home the woman had shared with her late husband, police said. Joanne Nichols' remains were found inside a large plastic bin inside a plastic bag and wrapped in a sheet, said Dr. Carrie Reiber, the Dutchess County medical examiner. The body was skeletonized and the hands were tied with rope. A large area of the right side of the skull was also missing. Sealing the body in the plastic bin behind the false wall might have been enough to mask the smell as the body decomposed, she said. Members of the medical examiner's office removed the body after it was found Friday and were able to identify Nichols through dental records. An autopsy showed the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Nichols, a 55-year-old former first-grade teacher at Gayhead Elementary School in Hopewell Junction, New York, was reported missing on December 21st, 1985, by her husband, James Nichols. Police said he called in the report after his wife didn't show up for a hair appointment at a beauty parlor earlier that day. The next day, the couple's vehicle was discovered in the parking lot of a shopping center in the town. Police Chief Thomas Morrow said an intensive investigation followed, but the woman was never located. The case had remained open since 1985 and was reviewed annually by police. James Nichols was found dead in the home on December 27th after concerned neighbors called police because they had not seen him in several days. He was 82 and died of natural causes. Officers said they found the house filled with personal items, debris, and garbage. No one in Nichols' family came forward to claim his body or take control of his estate, so Dutchess County Commissioner of Finance, Pamela Barrick, was appointed as temporary administrator, according to Barrick's attorney. We were only able to locate 2 family members of Mr. Nichols, but they were not able to claim his body. Nichols was buried by the Dutchess County Department of Community and Family Services in an unknown location. The town of Poughkeepsie Police Department said it has not closed the case and will continue to examine the new forensic evidence. It's now safe to say James Nichols is a suspect in the case, said Police Captain Paul LeConte. The town of Poughkeepsie surrounds the city of Poughkeepsie in southeastern New York State, about 70 miles north of New York City.
Keith Reinhard. This mystery starts with another man, Tom Young, who one day in 1987 took his dog for a walk near Silver Plume, Colorado, and never returned. Young had been renting retail space in town, which was then rented to Keith Reinhard. The new tenant found Young's story so intriguing that he began writing a novel in which the main character was a composite of both Young and Reinhard. In 1988, a week after, Young's body was found by hunters with a shot to the head, presumed suicide. Not supposed to say that word on YouTube and such places. But I refuse to speak in codes. Reinhard went for a hike and never returned. Coincidence? Conspiracy? No one knows.
Owen Parfit. The disappearance of old Owen Parfit from his sister's front porch in the English countryside isn't nearly as famous as, say, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart in 1937, but it's even more mysterious. In the summer of 1763, while living with his sister in the town of Shepton Mallet, the paralyzed 60-year-old Parfit simply disappeared. He obviously couldn't have walked off, but even the farm workers in the field across the road from the porch where Parfit was sitting didn't see anyone come or go. One moment he was there, the next minute, poof, he was gone.
The McDonald's Boys. A case remembered by many in the country with a borderline boogeyman reputation. 2 12-year-old boys, Ta Hong Halt and Kei Chen An, went missing without a trace. All that remained of them were their school books and bags, which were found under a tree. They were dubbed the McDonald's Boys by the press after a fast food chain offered a $100,000 reward for anyone who had any information on the whereabouts of the boys, and their missing posters were placed in the chain's outlets throughout the country. Despite the cash reward and an extensive police search, no trace of the boys have been found. Many theories emerged, from abduction to murder.
Murder.
But with no evidence to prove any of their credibility, the case remains open. One of the most solid theories is that the boys were kidnapped by a syndicate, had their limbs chopped off, and made to beg on the streets of a foreign country. This theory gained even more credence after a Singaporean on holiday claimed to have seen a street beggar resembling one of the boys, minus his arms and legs.
The Lost Girls of Panama. In April of 2014, 2 Dutch women, Chris Kremers and Lizanne Froon, were hiking the El Pianista Trail near Boquete, Panama. They were in the region to volunteer at a local school and learn Spanish. They were informed that their assistance wasn't needed for another week, so they decided to explore the area in the meantime. Unfortunately, neither Chris nor Lizanne ever returned from that hike. Search parties were sent out but came back empty-handed. 2 months later, Lizanne's left foot which had been detached at the ankle, was found in her hiking boot. Chris's pelvis was also discovered, split in two. Later, locals found Lizanne's backpack, which held their bras, phones, $87 in cash, and a Canon PowerShot camera. The camera had dozens of strange photos on it, most of which were taken at night, dated a week after the women initially disappeared. Not much is known about what happened to Lizanne and Chris. According to police, the duo asked an innkeeper for directions before their hike and later that day asked for assistance returning to town. It was the last time they were ever seen.
Jason Jolowoski. On Wednesday, June 13th, 2001, Jolowoski was called into work early. Due to his car being at a repair shop, he initially planned to walk to his job, which was located over 4 miles away, but eventually made arrangements for a co-worker to give him a ride. Since Jolowoski had trouble giving directions, he arranged for them to meet at Benson High School, which he and his co-worker had previously attended. The school was 8 blocks from his home. At 10:45 a.m., Jolowoski was last seen by a neighbor who saw him help his younger brother pull trash cans from the curb back to the house. Less than an hour later, between 11:15 and 11:30, his coworker called the house, stating that he had failed to turn up at Benson High School for the ride to work. Jolowoski has not been seen or heard from since then. Shortly after his disappearance, the school's security cameras were checked, but none of them showed Jolowoski arriving at the school. A police officer investigating his disappearance deemed it the most baffling case he had seen in 30 years. As of 2024, the Omaha Police Department continues to investigate the case.
The Beaumont children went missing in 1966 and became Australia's longest-running missing persons case. It was a sweltering summer day in Adelaide, Australia, when 3 children, Jane, Arna, and Grant Beaumont, boarded a bus heading to Gleneagh Beach, a 5-minute ride away. Although they were unescorted, they knew the transportation routes well. It was Australia Day on January 26, 1966, pickup sticks, and the area was packed with beachgoers arriving in droves to enjoy the holiday and escape the heat. Nancy Beaumont expected her children to return on the noon or 2 p.m. buses. However, she and her husband Jim began to worry when the children weren't home by the time their father returned from work at 3 p.m. Jim drove to the beach in a vain attempt to find his children. The young Beaumonts, aged 9, 7, and 4, were never seen or heard from again. They let kids 9, 7, and 4 take off to the beach for the day. After returning from the beach and scouring the neighborhood, Jim and Nancy reported their children missing and offered a $250 reward, with champs, for any information witnesses might provide. Many beachgoers recall seeing a sun-baked man in his 30s shuffling kids away from the waters, but they also noted that the children seemed acquainted with the swimmer. Nancy recalled that her children had recently began joking about Jane's boyfriend at the beach. At the time, she thought nothing of it. Now, the seemingly light-hearted banter took an ominous tone. Investigators produced a sketch of the man and showed it to hundreds of witnesses, but nothing ever came from the leads. The officials became so desperate for answers that they flew a clairvoyant in from the Netherlands, hoping to find answers. After the clairvoyant revealed that his mind's eye had seen the children at a warehouse near the school, a local group raised more than $40,000 to have it demolished and searched. Unsurprisingly, nothing was found. In 1986, 3 suitcases emerged filled with newspaper clippings concerning the children, with ominous text scribbled in the margins. Upon further investigation, authorities learned the suitcases belonged to an amateur sleuth recently deceased who had spent years trying to solve the mystery. Random witnesses continued to provide tips over the years, believing they might have spotted the kidnapper. However, the sun-kissed swimmer was never positively identified. The case remains open to this day, making it the longest-running missing persons investigation in the nation.
Asha Degree, a 9-year-old girl, gets up in the middle of the night in the dead of winter, gets dressed, and packs a backpack, and takes off on foot. She is seen walking along a highway, in the dark, in the rain, by multiple drivers. One of them tried to stop her, and she ran into the woods. The following year, her backpack was found, wrapped in a trash bag, and buried at a construction site. There was a nightgown and a book from her school's library, neither of which her parents recalled being in her possession when she went missing.
You might have heard of this one. Virginia Dare. On August 18th, 1587, Virginia Dare was born in Roanoke Colony, making her the first English child born in the Americas. Her grandfather was John White. Thanks, Pop-Up Ad. Who later that year had helped found Roanoke. But White never saw Virginia grow up, because by the time he returned to Roanoke from an extended trip to retrieve supplies, the entire colony had vanished. Not just the people, but every structure. No one knows what happened to Virginia or the rest of the Roanoke colonists.
A 14-year-old girl, Lin Zin Ying, also known as Tina, vanished without a trace when on her way to visit her sick grandfather. Initially, she was deemed as a runaway teenager, as her parents noticed she did not take her passport and she did not have a lot of money with her. The claims were further solidified when traces of her unhappiness before her disappearance started to surface. However, unlike most runaway cases in the country, she never came back. The real mystery lies in the events described below. Soon after, her grandparent passed away. Along with the obituary, Tina's parents placed a message for Tina to come to the wake to see her grandparent for the last time. While Tina did not show up, a phone call came, and when Tina's father picked up the call, he heard the voice of Tina on the other side of the line. The caller made multiple calls, and each time, different relatives at the wake spoke to the caller, urging her to return home.
Urge. I've got the urge.
She's got the urge to hurl.
All the relatives who had spoke to the caller claimed they recognized the voice as Tina's, and the police was alerted. The calls were eventually traced to a flat, and officers were dispatched to investigate. But however, no sign of Tina was found in the flat. This led to the police to classify the calls as a hoax call, but the relatives who spoke to her insist that the caller was Tina. While they may have placed a note hoping for Tina to return home, the incident brought more questions. Was the caller really Tina? If yes, why was no trace of her found at the flat? If the caller wasn't Tina, who was it? And how did she manage to fool multiple relatives who knew the missing Tina?
This story is called Vanished. Gerald Potter and his wife Carrie gazed out of the DC-3's window at the rolling Ozark Hills 8,000 feet below. They could just make out the doll-sized buildings of Rolla, Missouri. In the distance sprawled the Fort Leonard Wood Army Camp. On that June 29th, 1968, the Purdue Aviation Corporation charter flight was carrying the Potters and 21 other passengers from Kankakee, Illinois, to a National Lions Club convention in Dallas. The flight had been smooth during the hour they had been airborne, and what looked like a fine cloudless summer day Pilot Miguel Raul Cabeza anticipated no weather disturbances. The passengers, most of them acquainted through the Lions Club, snoozed or chatted. As the aircraft passed over Rolla, Gerald Potter excused himself and headed towards the lavatory in the rear tail section. He stopped briefly to talk with James Shivey, president of the Lions Club in Ottawa, Illinois. Potter was the quintessential middle American businessman, a successful insurance executive with a reputation for friendliness and sociability that had bought him membership not only in the Lions Club, but also the Elks, Moose, and the Chamber of Commerce in his hometown of Pontiac, Illinois. He was also in the best of health. 2 happily married daughters and a pleasant home life completed the picture of normality. Sorry, I'm reading from a book and my eyes haven't gotten any better. Mrs. Potter watched her husband walk back towards the lavatory and saw him stop with Mr. Shivey. Then she turned to gaze out at the beautiful green countryside below. Carrie Potter never saw her husband again. Several minutes later, the plane shuddered as if caught by a sudden wind. It lasted only a few seconds and caused no concern among the passengers. But when her husband didn't return, Carrie Potter grew nervous. She looked anxiously towards the tail, but saw no sign of her husband. The lavatory door was closed. Mrs. Potter called a stewardess and asked her to check the lavatory. At about the same time, Pilot Cabeza noticed that one of his red doors open warning signs was flashing. Cabeza asked co-pilot Roy Backus to check the emergency doors. Backus moved quickly but casually so as not to raise concerns among the passengers. The stewardess stopped him as he walked down the aisle. "I think a passenger is missing. A Mr. Potter," she whispered, clearly frightened. Backus felt a chill. "Are you sure?" The stewardess nodded. She said Jerome Potter was last seen near the lavatory when the DC-3 was shaken by some force. "He isn't there now. No one has seen him," she said. Backus's gaze swept over the rear passenger compartment area. The exit door near the lavatory was slightly open. That was the cause of the emergency flasher on the flight deck. But since the DC-3 wasn't pressurized, the rush of air coming into the cabin hadn't caused any problems. Backus then spotted a small piece of chain used to keep the emergency exit door closed lying on the floor. He scooped it up and headed forward. He related the bizarre situation to Cabeza, who speculated Potter may have been thrown against the door as the aircraft lurched, and when the safety chain broke, fell out. "But no one saw him fall. He has simply disappeared," Backus emphasized. Cabeza immediately radioed the Springfield, Missouri airport about the situation and asked permission to land. On the ground, mechanics found the emergency door still ajar, the stairs locked in its down position. There was no sign of Potter. What happened? How could a man be inside an airplane nearly 2 miles in the air and then not be there? Did Gerald Potter commit suicide while leaping from this plane? It seems unlikely. From all reports, Potter was happily married with no financial problems. He seemed to be looking forward to the convention in Dallas with his wife. Could Potter have somehow mistakenly opened the emergency door, thinking it was a lavatory? Again, this seems improbable. A large white sign with a bright red background attached to the emergency door reads, "Do not open while in flight." Although the safety chain had broken, a door handle still had to be turned 180 degrees to allow the locks to be released. According to Grove Webster, the president of the Purdue Aviation Charter Company, Purdue Aviation, the door was always locked tightly on takeoff, and he said in a report after the accident, it took a lot of effort to open the hatchway, even on the ground. Air pressure during flight would make the door doubly difficult to budge. Ground mechanics regularly closed the door for stewardesses before takeoff. Even after the aircraft landed, many stewardesses could not open the hatch by themselves. Potter's widow and family members filed suit several months later, charging Purdue Aviation with negligence in maintenance and safety procedures. There was a problem, however. No one saw Gerald Potter fall from the aircraft. The ground beneath the DC-3's flight path at that time of the disappearance was thoroughly searched, but no body was ever found. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Holy mackerels!
On September 14th, 2007, 14-year-old Andrew Gostin skipped school, withdrew around 200 pounds from his bank account, and bought a one-way train ticket to London. The last time he was ever seen, it was on CCTV footage, captured at King's Cross Station. In the years since, little information about Andrew Gostin or his whereabouts have been revealed. Police are still unsure why Andrew headed to London that day, or whom he was planning to meet, if anyone. And though 2 men were arrested in December of 2021 on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, they have since been cleared of any suspicion in the matter. Today, the case for Andrew Gostin's disappearance continues to baffle experts and true crime enthusiasts alike, with any answers seemingly ever out of reach. One of the strangest elements of Andrew Gostin's case is how seemingly idyllic his home life had been. Born on January 10th, 1993, to Kevin and Glenys Gostin, Andrew grew up in Balby, a suburb of Doncaster, England. His parents, Anglican Christians, opted not to baptize their children, as they explained to the Telegraph in 2008. They did not want to impose their views on them. Instead, they encouraged their children to explore their own interests and discover things in their own ways. Andrew and his sister Charlotte became deeply invested in their own separate hobbies. Andrew enjoyed books like Harry Potter and Alex Rider. His sister dyed her hair black and leaned heavily into the mid-2000s goth scene. The two bonded over their shared love for rock and metal bands. Andrew was also highly intelligent. In the weeks before he went missing, he had been reading Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and he was in his school's gifted program. Andrew was such a good student, in fact, that he had never even missed a day of school. Most of his teachers assumed he would wind up going to Cambridge. His parents also noted that he had friends, but was rather introverted and happy in his own company. Furthermore, he never showed any signs of depression, and it didn't seem as though he was being bullied. He had never left home without telling his parents where he was going. By all accounts, Andrew Gostin appeared to be a shy, intelligent young man with a bright future ahead of him. So when one day he suddenly decided to skip school and book a train to London, it begged the question, why? Andrew Gostin left his parents' home on the morning of September 14th, 2007, presumably heading for school as he did every morning. His parents, too, left home for work. They both worked as speech therapists. When they returned, there was no sign of Andrew. At first, they assumed he was just in the basement playing Xbox. Then they saw his school uniform lying on the chair in his bedroom. It seemed that he had come home at some point and changed clothes. But where was he? Andrew's parents rang some of his friends who said that he was not with them. In fact, he hadn't even come to school that day. As it turned out, the school had tried to contact the Gostins earlier that day to notify them of Andrew's absence. Unfortunately, they had called the wrong family by mistake. We are woefully out of time. Hope you enjoyed the show. Do yourself a favor and go check out Vanished Part 1, way back on episode 115. Thanks as always, Jimmy Haunted. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again right here next week. God bless.